Okay, so my origin story, I figure I should probably do a quick rundown, so to speak, so that when I reference things about the cult, you kind of know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to research any of these details to make sure I've got all the dates and things correct because that doing too much research into the cult, like reading old literature and stuff like that to get timelines perfectly accurate, I just think would be re traumatizing myself, and I'm not interested in doing that. So I won't. So this is just to the best of my recollection. I was born into this cult and raised in it. So I was a child throughout the whole time I was there. I left 2 months after my 18th birthday. So, you know, children might remember things a little off, but then again, it was 18 years of my life, so I think I got most of the. I think it's pretty factual. First off, the cult was called originally the Children of God, later the Family of Love, then just simply the Family, and then the Family International. Basically, anytime things were kind of going a little awry for them, they had some new revolution and changed their name so that they were perceived in a better light and would claim that they got rid of all the bad ones and now they're on this good track, which of course wasn't the case. They got rid of any doubters or people that had problems with the bad things they were actually doing. And once they cleansed themselves of the bad people, then they changed their name so that they wouldn't be associated with previous bad acts that people were, looking at them for. So, oh yes, today was wash day, so my hair is still drying. That's why it's not in a ponytail, but I probably will end up throwing it back in a ponytail at some point. Okay, for the purpose of brevity, sounds funny coming from me, I will either refer to them as the COG or TFI, which is for the Children of God or the Family International. I'm not sure which one I prefer to use, really. I use them both interchangeably. So if I'm using either of those, what is it called, an acronym? That's who I'm referring to, or I'll just simply say the cult. If you want to know a whole lot of in depth, or you really want to do that deep dive thing, Google is your friend. There's so many things out there. I mean, they did a Law and Order episode about Ricky Rodriguez. Sorry, my dog. She's very fierce over here, barking at everything, right, Miss Lady? There's documentaries. I think Montel Williams did some interviews with former cult members. There are a few famous cult members like Joaquin Phoenix and River Phoenix that their family was a member of the cult. So was Rose McGowan. I never met either of them or any of them. In the cult or out of the cult, so I can't speak to their personal experiences. My experience is my experience, depending on what part of the world you were in, what sort of commune you were in. There are different experiences that people have, and no two stories are perfectly identical, even within the same family. So I'm not speaking on behalf of all cult members, I'm speaking about my own personal experience and my recollection of events that happened to me or around me or near me that affected me. I really don't, not everyone chooses to be out. Good Jesus, lady, girl, there is nobody there. You're barking at shadows. She's a really sweet little dog, but she is a rescue, and so she's literally terrified of everything, including her own shadow. And at least she feels that she can speak out about it now. It's actually a sign that she's very comfortable, that she's willing to bark, because when she's terrified, she's just quiet in the corner. Stop. Anyways, I digress. The cult started, I believe it was in the 60s, Huntington Beach, California. Like all best things, it was made in America. It was founded, heavy sarcasm for anyone who didn't catch it. Um, the founder's name was David Brant Berg. I will probably just call him Berg. In the cult, um, he went by many names. King David, Moses, and Grandpa would be the one that we would probably use the most, because that's how he was we were supposed to view him as children of the cult, that he was like a grandpa. He divorced his first wife when she didn't believe the same way he did and thought he had an overinflated ego, and he was incestuous towards his children, and she disapproved. She was painted as a very terrible person within the cult, but honestly, she definitely did the right thing. Berg ended up meeting his second wife, Karen Zerby. Of course, her name was Karen. Um, I will refer to her as Zerby, but within the group, she was most commonly known as Mama Maria. So if I ever do mention Mama Maria or Maria, that is who I'm referring to, would be Karen Zerby. But I will try to just call her Zerby because that is her actual name, and it sounds like she's some kind of weird alien monster, and she is. So it seems appropriate. Not no offense to anyone whose name is Zerby, um, or Karen. Um, and then there's King Peter, who was Berg's right hand man. His real name is Kelly, I believe. I'm not sure if that's his first or last name. Um, I will probably just call him Kelly. But we knew him as King Peter within the cult. So those are like the main top leadership people. Berg passed away in the mid 90s. I want to say 94, 95. I don't really remember. I was a teenager. Um, every year for his birthday, we would fast for the week leading up to the birthday, and then we would have a celebration on his birthday. And like we would fast and pray and, hope our great leader has good health and all that. And then he died shortly before his birthday, if I'm remembering correctly. And instead, we had a feast, which that was a big. I was like, "Yay, he's dead! We don't have to starve for a week. That's awesome." Um, yeah, we did a lot of fasting for various reasons. It's not in most regular cult homes, but the first 7 years or so, I was in what we called a Selah home, which was basically, we called them homes. They were communes, but we always called them homes. Feels weird calling them a home. But they a Selah home was comprised of typically more talented people, people that could benefit them because of their talents. My dad is an artist, songwriter, musician, and so his talents were seen as something that could benefit the cult. And so these Selah homes were fully supported by the other communes. They didn't have to fundraise for themselves. They could, but generally wouldn't do it that much. Selah to us meant secret. Basically, need to know only. Other communes in the area would not know where we were located. They were very top secret. And we celebrated certain privileges that other communes did not. As in, we had better food typically because the top things that would be provisioned, which was, provided for free by people that supported our cult. Um, Usually, a lot of the best things were sent to the Selah communes. And so we did have privilege in that aspect. However, because they were so secretive, there were a lot of really sketchy things that went on because we were sort of like the guinea pigs of the cult and how to properly raise your children. So discipline was extremely, extremely rigid. Us kids were supervised quite excessively because we had to be model citizens and representatives of the cult to the other communes. So there were elements that were worse. Ricky Rodriguez is a perfect example. He was the son of Zerby, and he was being raised to be the prince and to take over the cult when his parents passed, and that was a pressure that was put on him. And while I'm sure he enjoyed nicer clothes than we did and ate better than we did, it, it is not up for dispute that he experienced some of the absolute worst trauma, and hardships that a child would go through. I know there's certain words that are considered like not good to use, like SA and CA. SA would stand for the sort of physical interaction that you do between consenting adults, but not in a consenting adult type of way. The A for both of these are standing for unpleasant things you have to experience regarding this thing. So, and then C would be for childhood, child A word, and SA would be referencing, you know, certain interactions that should only be done between consenting adults, period. So hopefully that was clear enough without actually using the words, because I notice a lot of YouTubers do not use those words, so I'm assuming they're considered trigger words. The R word would be for forcibly having non-consensual interactions with another person, where bodily fluids are involved. Um, so I think I've covered like all the initials I'm using here. So anyways, the cult started, and my parents joined, I believe it was in the early 70s. They were high school sweethearts. They went to Southwest High, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And they got married shortly after high school. They had my oldest sister, and around had their own apartment, and around that time they met a couple that were from the cult, and they were enamored by the idea of this revolution and da da da. And people always ask, why do other people join a cult? And I think the main reason is because they want to make sure that they aren't susceptible to making those same mistakes, so that they can feel safe. Because people tend to think a whole lot, they worry more about why people join the cult and what led them to finally have that aha moment and leave. People are less concerned about the results and the trauma that happen to the children that are a result of parents' decision. And I don't know why people join a cult. People have asked me this so many times. It's one of the first questions people ask. Aside from going, oh, now I know why you're a little weird. You make more sense now. And then they always want to ask why people join. I'm like, don't ask me. The only choice I made on the matter was I chose to leave. That was the only decision I made regarding the cult, was to leave. I didn't have a choice in where I was born. And a lot of things growing up, I didn't realize how wrong they were, because to me, they were just normal. We were so shielded and sheltered from the world that I didn't know it wasn't normal, that I didn't know it was unhealthy, because I just thought this is how people live their lives. I understood we lived our lives a little differently from others, but I didn't think that there were things wrong with that. To me, it was just what you did. So none of it was really, overwhelmingly wrong to me as I grew up. Little by little, I started realizing things that were wrong. This is getting long, so I might have to make it another video. But yeah, my parents joined, and that's what started it all. To go back to why people join cults, I don't think anyone ever really joins a cult. Maybe some do, but I think most people just see this is different, and they're not seeing everything, because you don't find out everything until you're on the inside, because they presented themselves in a certain way. Like after COVID, I've heard so many people talk about, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to just live in a commune and like share everything and everyone just be like there to support each other. And I always have to leave my little 2 cents of, trust me, a commune lifestyle is not as easy and as wonderful as one might imagine it to be. I'm sure there could be good communes. I just personally have not experienced that. So I just always throw in my 2 cents from my own personal experience, because a lot of people have never lived in a commune style setting. So they will fantasize about what it's like. I imagine if, you're not being extraordinarily brainwashed or controlled by a cult overlord, that a commune lifestyle could actually be very nice and very beneficial. But I didn't experience that sort of commune lifestyle. So I have a very negative view of it, but that is because of my personal experience and not that it couldn't be a good thing. Um, Always got to throw out all the disclaimers. Um, Maybe I'll just make this a long one. There's so much to cover. So, after my parents got married and had my first sister, then they joined the cult. And it was really right around that time, the US government, if they can't get you for anything, they will come at you for tax evasion. Death and taxes, man, the only guaranteed thing. So they were pursuing the group for tax evasion. And randomly, all of a sudden, Berg got a prophecy from God or Jesus or whoever he was talking to at that month. And decided that, America was Babylon the whore. Read up on your Bible if you don't know what that is. And that Babylon the whore was going to be destroyed. And so we had to leave it. America was evil and it was time to go. I honestly think they were just dodging legal problems. But anyways, they had this revelation to go out into the whole world and preach the gospel to all the peoples. And, white savior shit. So that's what they did. And so my parents had just joined and they moved to Rome. And my mom said that they could see the Colosseum from their apartment window. But I've also been told that it's not that special to see some historical landmark anywhere you live in Rome. The historical landmark that they could see was the Colosseum, but pretty much Rome is just full of iconic historical everything. So I would love to visit Rome. Italy was my mom's favorite country that they ever lived in. She loved learning how to cook the food. She was just a very skilled cook. And so she learned how to make proper pasta and lasagna and all the things. And anything that went in the oven, like any baked goods, she was exceptional at. Her art was in the kitchen and crocheting and knitting and sewing and all those home ec type things. She was phenomenal with that. She was an artist of her own in the arts and crafts and, of course, in the kitchen. She was amazing. She was what we would call, actually, both my parents is what we would call one of the good adults, simply because they didn't actively abuse substantial, I just said the A word. They didn't actively harm a substantial amount of children. They did cause harm in situations. They had 7 daughters in a predatory environment where children were not off limits from a pretty young age, and still chose to continue to have children and raise them in this environment. So they are not flawless. They knew what was happening and they chose to not acknowledge it and not do anything to protect their children. So when I say they were one of the good ones, they were, but also they are still responsible for their actions or their inactions, because inactions and not speaking out against things is still a problem. I actually, that is the way I view, to go on a completely different tangent, but that's the way I view like police. They're not all directly responsible for what happens, but they are part of the system that enables that behavior, and they don't always speak out or do anything to adjust the behavior. So that's where, that's the sort of relation I take to like real life. But anyways, I digress. While they were in Italy, they had my second sister and my third sister, and then my brother. And my brother, they moved shortly after he was born, and they moved to Ireland. Now, this was 79, and they were in Ireland, I think it was for not quite a year. And 79 was a really rough year historically for Ireland. The IRA, I believe it was fighting very aggressively with the royal family. They were trying to get independence for Ireland. I probably don't know enough about that history, but it was a really dark time for Ireland. There was constant strikes, is my understanding. I believe the post office was on strike. propane business, I think it was what they used to heat their home, if I'm remembering correctly. I wasn't born yet, so this is really off recollection from eons ago that I didn't participate in. A phone company was on strike. Like, there was a lot of strikes going on. There was a lot of upheavals. There was a yacht that was exploded by a bomb that killed someone like eighth in line to the British throne. Or there was just a lot of really difficult times happening in the country. So my mom never really cared a whole lot for Ireland, and I understand why. It was going through some rough times. Ireland has always been number one on my list of places I would like to visit. Um, I'm not letting the bad experience they had 40 some years ago affect my desire and interest in the country. But they were there during a very dark time, and they had their own personal trauma happen at the same time, which was avoidable. My brother was a very, very happy, content child from everything I've heard. He was a very easygoing child. He would laugh very easily. He was just very content. He didn't cry a lot. However, he suddenly got sick, and from one day to the next went from being happy and healthy to being very ill. And then the following day, before they even had time to really react, he died. He had double pneumonia. Now, this is the story I was told for years. And then about 10 years or so ago, I called up my dad and I was wanting to know where my brother was buried, because I have been given the responsibility of spreading mom's ashes at his funeral site. And I wanted to get an idea of where the church graveyard was so I could find it. Big news, I found it through Google Maps. But I digress. So my dad was explaining, like, how, when you're driving from Dublin and there's this hill and you're about 40 some minutes outside of Dublin, there was this church and there was this graveyard. But then he ended up sharing more about the story, and it was a version I had never heard. I don't know if he shared it with my other sisters at some point, but I was not aware of this. Apparently, my brother had been sick for quite some time. It sounded like several weeks. It sounded like over a month, maybe 5-6 weeks or so. He had been very ill. He was still happy and content during the day, but at night when you'd lay him flat, he would cough and like choke on fluid, like his lungs were full of fluid, and it sounded like he was drowning. And instead of taking him to the hospital, for several weeks, they prayed for him. And I do say that, I mean the condescension in my voice when I say that. If you believe in prayer, that is wonderful for you. I'm glad you have that comfort. However, if you want to believe that God will provide for you, maybe he also provided doctors that can help you. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in that, but I do like to give people allowance for believing whatever they want. But when it harms someone else, maybe trust that God gave us doctors for a reason. Maybe that's what they're here for. By the time my mom finally insisted that they take her son to the hospital, it was far too late. There was nothing they could do. He had been so sick for so long. They did their best. Had it happened nowadays in a country that wasn't in internal turmoil, because this was about 43 years ago. 42 years ago. I don't know how old I am. So this was a long time ago. And had it happened nowadays, the 3 older sisters probably would have been removed from their custody, and there would have been an investigation into child neglect, I imagine. But at the time, that didn't happen, and my brother died. At the time, mom was pregnant with me and didn't know it yet. And she was convinced once I was born that I was his reincarnation, which maybe I am. I don't know. I am a bit of a tomboy. Maybe that's what it is. But anyways, they left Ireland shortly after my brother passed away, and they moved to Portugal. And I was born there. We lived in a little city outside of Lisboa, called Oeiras. And I actually have met another person from the cult who was born in that same hospital, which means that we were born in the same room and on the same bed. He is, I think, a couple of months or so older than me. And the town of Oeiras only had at that time, one hospital. And that hospital only had one delivery room, and that delivery room only had one bed. So, unless they had changed the bed out in the couple of months since he was born to when I was born, we were born in the same goddamn bed. Imagine meeting someone in Brazil that tells you they were born in the same hospital and bed in this city you're from. I don't even know how small or big Oeiras is. I just know it's sort of a suburb or something of Lisbon. So most of the time, because a lot of people don't even know where Portugal is, I don't even bother breaking it down to Oeiras. I say I was born in Portugal and I verify. Actually, this is the way I say it. I was born in Europe. And then I narrow it down to Portugal. If they still know a little something about it, I say I was born in Lisbon. And if they're like, oh my God, I've been to Lisbon. I'm like, well, technically it wasn't Lisbon. It was Oeiras. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, at how geographically inept a lot of people are. Not trying to call out Americans, but it is mostly Americans who don't know where Portugal is. It is a little tiny sliver of land connected to Spain. It is about, I think, about 1,000 miles. It's really close to the Morocco, which is a little island just above the top part of the continent of Africa. They used to be known for their navy. They were all over the world doing trade and this and that, and they were considered one of the world superpowers back in the day. That is Portugal. And yeah, so, anyways, that's where I was born. We were there until I was about 2.5, and we actually lived in the former commune home of Berg and Zerby. They had left and we took over the property that they had been staying at. It was some kind of like stone palace type thing based on the pictures I've seen of myself back there. I don't really remember much about it. I did visit Spain when we went on a visa trip, which is basically, if you've never done a visa trip, when you have like a temporary residency in a country, after so many months, your visa expires and you have to exit the country, renew it from the outside, and come back. And so that's what a visa trip is. And we visa tripped in Spain. I don't remember Spain either because, again, I was really small. And when I was about 2.5, we moved to Brazil. We moved to Petrópolis, which is a suburb of Rio in the state of Rio. Rio de Janeiro is both the name of the city and the state. And it used to be the capital of Brazil eons ago. No longer. Brasilia is the capital of Brazil now, for people who don't know. So anyways, we moved to Rio, specifically Petrópolis. And we actually, the house that we lived in had been the house that was built for the Portuguese ambassador back in the day. So it was a really beautiful place. And we lived there. And we did visa trip in Argentina and Paraguay. We went to the Iguazu Falls. And there is a spot where you can stand both on Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay all at the same time. And apparently I did that. I don't remember, but apparently I've technically visited those other two countries, even though I do not recall. But after we did the one visa trip, we didn't have to visa trip anymore because my sister was born, my next sister. And in Brazil, if you are born in the country, you get automatic citizenship, similar to in the United States. However, you also get a form of citizenship for the rest of your family. Your direct family gets what is called permanent residency. You are not a citizen, but you no longer have to take visa trips, and you are, for all intents and purposes, a resident, like a second class citizen, literally, to the country. You can't run for political office. You cannot be part of the military, and you can't vote. I believe those are the only restrictions. But you can live and work and benefit from all sorts of things. You could be an advisor to a politician. I don't know if any of those rules have since changed, but at the time, that's what it is. So I have permanent residency to Brazil. It is something you have to renew. Mine expired a while back and I can't renew it here in the US. I would have to go to Brazil and renew it, but I could, and it's valid for 10 years. My son was also born in Brazil. He was born in Brasilia. So he is a Brazilian by birth as well. After my sister was born, then my twin sisters were born also in Petrópolis. And so our family at the time was complete. We had the one brother who passed away. He and I would have shared the middle child spot. But since his passing, I had three older sisters and three younger sisters. And by had, I mean I still do have these sisters. And I am in the middle. And this is how I grew up, being the middle of seven sisters. Um, then I'm really I'm trying to keep it really to the point, but there's all sorts of details, and I cannot stop myself from going off on tangents. So anyways, so those were the seven, the first litter of children. And then, so in the cult, they were all about the family, not your personal family. And at the time, they were called the family. So my dad and mom, they were very much about them. And at the time, the younger sisters were born very shortly after we ended up entering the mainstream. Like a couple years after they were born, they were like 2 or 3 when we left being in the Selah home and went into a normal commune. And we actually have a video from that time, and it's oh so cringe, um, but still awesome. But yeah, so um, my dad, they really wanted to use him in leadership, and he was typically leadership. However, they saw that he really cared a lot about his personal family, and that was problematic because his loyalties needed to be to the cult and not to others. And so they I think when the twins were about 3 or 4, I don't remember exactly. I was about 8 or 9. When they removed him from the commune we were in and moved him to a different commune. And then they would set him up with other young women. And one of these women he ended up taking a liking for. And they had 2 boys together. And then around the time that her second son was being born, they had moved him again, and he was back into a Selah commune, and we had little to no contact with him. I believe my mom and the oldest sister were given a number to call. I don't believe it went directly to him, but it went to a contact that would then let him know that we were in need of contacting him. So we had no way to actually contact him. He had to contact us because, again, we were not in the Selah commune at the time, so we were not privy to the need to know information. Um, and during this time, he had been paired with a young single mother. Um, she was, I believe, 20 at the time, and she had 2 girls that I believe were like 4 and 6 or 7. I'm not positive. Um, she had had her first daughter when she was quite young, a teenager. I won't go into too many specifics, but she was a teenager, and the father of her first child was, in my understanding, older than her own father, because cult shit. So they had paired her with my father. He was 40 and she was 20, and they fell in love. They have been married for, how old is the oldest one? I think like 25, 26 years they've been together. She has been really, really good for him. She is 7 years older than me, 2 years older than my oldest sister. They together had 4 boys and then a girl. And after they had their girl, um, she was born with some health defects. Okay, I just said defects, and that feels like she's not broken. But she faces certain health challenges. She has spina bifida. And so she faces certain challenges. And luckily, in her case, they did actually seek medical care. They moved to the States and planned to give birth in a facility that specialized in spina bifida and could take her immediately into surgery when she was born. And so I was so happy that they chose to properly care for her. Um, and then they moved from there to Mexico, and they were there for a while. And the doctor had advised not to have more children for quite some time. They did almost decide to have a kid because children smell so nice, and wouldn't it be lovely to have a child again? That was when my sister was 4. And me and one of my stepsisters had a mini intervention. Like, you don't have a child because babies smell nice. You need to be able to take care of the children you already have. Um, and they didn't have another one until my sister was, I think, 8. And so I do believe they were preventing pregnancy at the time, which I'm so glad for. And after my youngest sister was born, she is 12 now, I want to say. But after she was born, my dad got snipped. And oh my God, was that wonderful, wonderful news. No offense to any of the younger siblings. I'm glad y'all are here, but good Lord, it needed to end. It needed to end. Just because you can procreate does not mean you should, especially when you neglect so many of your other children. Um, like, for instance, when I was 17 and pregnant with my son, which means that the oldest of the sisters, of the 7 of us, was 21, I think, at the time, yeah, she was 21 at the time. And the youngest were 11. And our mom died from a brain tumor. And so these are 11 to 21-year-olds, all 7 of us. And dad told us that we should be another man's problem. We should all be married off and be another man's problem because he didn't have time to take care of us because he had his new family that he was working on. And I'm like, okay, but like 4 of your children are still minors and still underage. Like, I understand you expecting the adult children to take care of themselves. And why do we need a man to take care of us either? But yeah, so the sentiment is not great. Okay, real quick. My mom's brain tumor, I'll probably do a whole thing about her health, but they did try to pray it away. They performed exorcisms on her because they were convinced that she was infected um, with basically exorcist stuff. They thought she was possessed by demons as opposed to a brain tumor. And my mom chose to get medical help. And so she was shunned and ostracized for seeking medical help. And yeah, there was a whole lot to do with that. But yes, they did also try to pray and exorcise her demon of fear away because she was afraid when she had multiple convulsions one morning, and of course that interpreted to them as she was possessed by the demon of fear, as opposed to I'm scared because my body just did some crazy things and I don't know what's going on with me. But that's how things are interpreted. So yeah, after my mom passed, because I left long before all the little siblings were born. So my mom passed when I was 16, and I had stayed with my grandma for a bit. I went to public school, which is a whole story in and of itself. I had my first systemite job. Oh yes, systemites are what we call outsiders and non-cult people. They are the system, part of the system, and they are systemites. I'm so proud to be a systemite these days. So anyways, after losing my mom, I was very disillusioned with a lot of things that I had been raised to believe in the cult. And I was basically ready to leave. But when my mom passed, my relatives didn't feel like family. That's a whole other story, but they didn't feel like family. I felt like being with family, and that meant my family that was still all in the cult at the time. So I went back. And I realized I wasn't staying in the cult for myself. I was staying to benefit my dad. So at least my dad, my one surviving parent, could be proud of me and I would stay. And then about 3 months into being back, I found out that I was pregnant. And that is the day that I knew I was leaving. When that little plus sign or the 2 lines or whatever it was on that test came back positive, I knew that while I knew how to maneuver and make the trauma less traumatic, and I knew how to get along in this cult environment, I wasn't going to risk putting my son in that environment because I knew I couldn't watch over him all the time. I knew I wouldn't be there all the time, and I couldn't protect him properly and still be in that cult. So for my own sake, I could stay there and make dad proud and just, that's my life. And, you know, but as soon as I knew I was going to have a mini me, and he so is, I knew he needed a better life. And I was planning on leaving. However, it did take a while to plan. It did take a while to do all that. So I ended up leaving 2 months to the day after he was born. And he was born 23 days before my 18th birthday. And then a month after that, we finally had all the paperwork together, and my grandparents paid for my flight to the US for me and my son. And I left and I traveled to the States. And that is as close to a nutshell. Oh my God, 40 minutes, literally. That is as close to a nutshell as I can do to introduce all the millions of siblings that I have. I believe we're 17, 18 altogether. And like we were all born in different places. My stepsisters, the older one was born, I want to say in Hong Kong, and the younger one was born in Japan, but it could be the other way around. All my little brothers and were all born in Brazil as well. I believe in Rio or somewhere thereabouts, maybe Baja, but somewhere in the state of Rio, I believe. But this was during the time I didn't know where Dad lived, so I don't know where they were living at the time. Um, and then my one younger sister was born in the US, in California. And then for the longest time, the oldest sister and the youngest sister were the only two to be born in the US. Everyone else was born abroad. But then we had a younger sister come along, and a youngest sister come along. And she was born in Mexico. I forget what city they were living in right now. I want to say Guadalajara. I never know if I'm supposed to pronounce things in English, Portuguese, or Spanish. It drives me nuts. I don't speak Spanish. I understand Spanish, and I can sort of mimic some of the words on occasion. So that's all our international family. Most born in the number one places people were born in is Brazil. And I believe secondly is Rome. And then after that, there's a handful of us that were just I think the U.S. is the third one because two were born there. And then I think the rest were just, there was a few of us that were the only ones born in our country. So I hope I didn't mix up anyone's country of birth to my two stepsisters. Yeah, I'm mostly looking at you guys because that's what I recollect, and I don't know if I got that correct. So yes, this has been way long enough. This is supposed to be my life, like in a nutshell, the cult stuff in a nutshell. I will go way more in depth on all sorts of things, but that gives you a rundown. If you really want more information about the cult, a lot more like what were their beliefs, this and that, I'll address bits and pieces in story form as it relates to me and my view of it. But if you really want just like facts and figures on that, there are tons of things you can Google search on it. Literally, if you look up, if you Google the Family International, Children of God, they do come up. They are either the top or like the second one that pops up. There's tons of YouTube stuff. There's tons of stuff about them everywhere. So you can get that kind of, mine is going to be way more chaotic and way more how it pertains to me, as opposed to like a proper overview of everything, because I'm not doing that kind of research. I don't need to be reading all their publications, and I don't need to traumatize myself that way. I'm going to bid you adieu. It is late, and I need to eat some peanuts. I really like these Japanese. I consider them Brazilian style peanuts. They are not. I had them in Brazil, but they are actually Japanese style peanuts, but the Japanese immigration into Brazil after World War II, I believe it was. I'm going off on a tangent. Anyways, they're great peanuts, and they have this lovely coating, and it makes me feel saudades for home. Saudades is a word I'll go into. Basically, homesick for some of the wonderful things about my childhood, like Brazil. But all right, I keep talking. Like I say, my sign-offs will probably take me forever to wrap up. I'm really not good at cutting myself off, and I could go off on a million tangents, and often do. This is me really trying to stay on point. So that is the cult in the best nutshell I could create for it, and the cult and my family. So when I reference sister number 1, number 2, number 3, stepsister 1, 2, 3, two stepsisters, it will make a little more sense. I'm really going to try to avoid using people's names, because not everyone wants to be included in the chaos and mayhem that I choose to include myself in by opening up and sharing about this. Not everyone wants to be connected to this cult, and not everyone is out on being cult, so that includes members of my family, and I don't want to disrupt any of that by calling them out by name. So yeah, that's a jumble of words that I'm saying for now, and I will probably upload this shortly. So good night. Ciao.